Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, nothing says honesty like taking the fifth, huh, Doc? Let's try something. What day of the week is it today?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color tie are you wearing?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color's the carpet in front of you?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Let's just get one thing straight. You don't have any rights under the Fifth Amendment because you've been pardoned, as you very well know. As the Supreme Court has been clear for a century and more, Brown versus Walker, 1896, when he has been pardoned, he may not stand upon his privilege. You know that. Your lawyers sitting behind you now shifting nervously in their chairs. They know it. This isn't about the Constitution. This isn't about the law. This is about contempt. Contempt for this body and contempt for the American people. But I think I know why you're doing it. It's because you don't want to answer questions. It's because you did all kinds of terrible things. It's because during the pandemic you got rich. Didn't you? You got rich while people were dying, hundreds of thousands of Americans, over 1 million in the end, and you were getting rich. And not only were you doing that, you were using federal employees with taxpayer money to apply for and solicit cash prizes for you personally. Cash prizes totaling over $1 million. You did all of that during the pandemic, didn't you? That's a question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
You remember Greg Folkers? Who was that?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Your chief of staff is the answer. Do you remember Patricia Conrad? Who was that?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
She was your personal assistant. And what were these individuals doing in the depth of the pandemic in November of 2020 when millions of Americans were suffering from COVID? What were they doing? I tell you what they're doing. Folkers was on your behalf soliciting and gathering information for a cash award. Let's look at it. We've got his email right. For the Dan David Award for Fauci, we need to beef up the COVID part. Do you have language in the can that you share that delineates how we responded in new ways to COVID? He sends this to multiple federal employees. What was the Dan David Award? Do you remember, Doc?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
It was a $900,000 cash award. $900,000 cash award. And he got it because he used federal employees to get it. And this wasn't the only award, was it, Dr. Fauci? In fact, you applied for and received at least 8 other federal cash prizes on federal time using federal employees and federal resources. Here they are over my shoulder. Besides the Dan David Award, you've got the Partnership for Public Service, you've got the Adelson Prize, you've got the Smithsonian Award, you've got the National Academy of Medicine's Award, you've got the CDC Foundation. In fact, you turned your staff into a full-time application machine. You actually wrote to people and said, do you think maybe I'd qualify? And you got cash for all of this. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 employees, was it? In fact, you used 8 separate federal employees on federal time using federal resources to solicit cash awards. Isn't that true?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Here they are right over my shoulder. Here's all of them. The people that you use, federal employees, so that you could go and get cash money. And the most hilarious part is that you weren't content to even dragoon them into applying for all of these cash awards. You then had them go out to the ethics agencies and ethics watchdogs and demand that you be able to get the money. That's right. We've got it in your emails. Your staff and employees on federal time, using federal resources, being paid with federal dollars, are soliciting cash for you. And then they're turning around and saying to the agency, we don't want just an answer, we want to get to yes, because Fauci wants the money. He wants it. We want to get to yes, and yes takes time. This is your chief of staff again, using federal email to pressure the agency's own ethics people so that you could get money, so that you could get rich. And it violated the law, didn't it, Dr. Fauci? Didn't it? It violated the law, didn't it? It is a question. You can answer. Go ahead.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Federal law, as you very well know, prohibits the solicitation of cash awards or other personal benefits for federal employees. And it certainly prohibits using your own employees to do this. 5 CFR section 2635-205B, it says it right there in black and white. You cannot use federal resources, federal dollars, federal employees, federal offices, federal email, federal time to solicit cash awards, and you did all of it, and the worst part is thousands of people were dying while you were doing it. You were supposed to be the nation's doctor, and you were playing one on TV, but this is what you were doing with your time. Isn't that true?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, I can see why. I can certainly see why. You know what I can't quite figure out is that why you were so obsessed with it, because you're already rich. I mean, and your scheme worked here. I mean, your net worth now is north of $12 million. You got over $1 million in cash awards during COVID, during a 12-month, 24-month span during COVID. $1 million you knocked down in cash money using federal resources. Now you're worth more than $12 million. You've got a pension that in its first year paid out north of $400,000 a year. 1 million people dead, you're getting rich. 1 million people dead, you're using federal employees to get cash awards for you. 1 million people dead, and you're here taking the fifth because you don't want to admit that what really happened in all that time was a multi-month, multi-year course of self-dealing. Isn't that true, Dr. Fauci?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, well, silence is admission. And here's the real thing. At the end of the day, it wasn't just about the money, really, was it? It was really about a power trip. I mean, through all of this, you want to be the most famous scientist in the world. You were so focused on getting every award and every drop of cash that you could, all because you wanted to be on TV. You wanted to be the sun god of science. You wanted to be the guy who was in charge of it all. You wanted to lambast Trump. You wanted to make sure that nobody else stole your spotlight. You wanted to be the guy. You had time to sit for InStyle magazine. Here's what you were doing with your time. You could sit for InStyle magazine, but you can't answer questions for the American people. You could sit for InStyle magazine, but you're here taking the fifth. You could sit for InStyle magazine and get $1 million in cash awards, but now the cat's got your tongue. I bet he does. I tell you what, here's my conclusion from all of this. This was really all about you the whole time. Somewhere along the way, you lost your way. You may have been a good public servant at one time, I don't know. But I can tell you from reading your emails now, from looking at what you did, how you used your employees, somewhere along the line, it became all about you. You became a narcissist and a megalomaniac and a liar. And you've lied to the American people, and you've lied to this body. And you've disgraced your profession by doing it. You called yourself the most famous scientist in the world. You've done more to harm science than anybody in my lifetime. And I hope you'll go home and write that in your diary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Fetterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci,
I don't know what it is, but it's not a democracy because we, the people, aren't in charge. These people are in charge, and they're lying to us every single day. You said in your opening statement that Dr. Fauci, speaking of someone who's not exactly a truth teller, that Dr. Fauci intervened to put his thumb on the scale of what information the intelligence community, the IC, could review when they did their initial assessments of whether or not the Wuhan lab was linked to COVID. What exactly did he do?
So let me clarify that. So he reached in and he provided this
list of scientists and subject matter experts that we should talk to. And it's not like he's saying, you will go talk to them. He doesn't have the power to do that technically. It's just that the bureaucracy in place at the time was perfectly happy to pursue those recommendations, even when there was a number of individuals who expressed concern, saying, at least one for sure, that said, are you sure we want to do this? He's a policymaker, and we need to have our intelligence cycle.
And he had a point of view, did he not?
He certainly did. And here's
And what was that point of view? Just refresh our memories.
he believes it's natural origin. He still does.
Of course. I mean, he said this over and over. Now, he would have reason to, given that he supported gain-of-function research to the Wuhan lab, lied about it to Congress, lied about it repeatedly to the chairman, as I recall. So his hands are dirty in this. And yet here he is intervening behind the scenes. It's bad enough that he's out there misleading the public. Behind the scenes, he's trying to intervene to stop our own intelligence community, who are supposed to work for the public, from actually accurately assessing the evidence. This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. And then people wonder, gee, why are the American people not trusting of elected officials? I wonder, why are they? I'll tell you why, because we are repeatedly lied to by these people. Lied to and lied to and lied to. I want to thank you, Mr. Erdman, for your testimony. I just want to note, I think we've only scratched the surface here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing. And I just want to point out, when you've got a witness who's saying under oath that the report that the government issued lied to the American people, that it is false, we've got a big problem in this country. We've got a big, big problem, and we haven't begun to solve it yet. They said, number one, that nothing that was researched at the Wuhan lab could plausibly be a progenitor of SARS-CoV-2. Number two, they said there is no evidence of any research-related incident involving Wuhan employees that might have been related to the pandemic. Now, in your experience, given what you have seen, are those true statements?
Some of that would have to be covered and classified, but no, they're not true.
Uh-huh.
If we wanted to get into details, I don't believe that's true.
So the United States government first deliberately violated a law passed by Congress, signed by the president, that ordered them to release all information related to the Wuhan lab, number one. Number two, they then violated the law again by withholding thousands and thousands of pages that they had at the time and knew were covered by the law. And number three, the conclusions, so-called, they released to the public are false. If that is not a cover-up, I don't know what is. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Erdman, thank you for being here. In March of 2023, the Senate unanimously passed legislation requiring the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to declassify all, I believe the exact language is, declassify any and all information related to potential links between the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the origins of COVID-19. I have some familiarity with this legislation because I wrote it. It passed the House unanimously. President Biden signed it into law under, I think, popular duress. As you may remember, well, first of all, are you familiar with this law?
Oh, of course, yes.
As you may recall, it set a statutory deadline of just a couple of months later, which the Biden administration promptly ignored and blew through. When they finally did release the report, I think we've got a picture of it here that'll appear over my shoulder. It was all of 5 pages. Yeah. Here it is. Wait for it. 5 pages. Remember, the law says any and all information. 5 pages, heavily redacted, even the 5 pages. I think one of those pages is like a cover note or something. Yeah, here it is. The executive summary, 5 pages. This is, according to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, this is any and all information related to COVID-19 and the Wuhan Virology Lab. Now, you've been on this task force that has reviewed these documents. Is this all the information the United States government had?
That is not all the information. And I'll tell you a little story about that if you'd like.
Please.
A little story about your 5 pages there. So there was a classified report being written at the time all of this was going on. And I assumed as I'm reading through the documents that they would just take that classified report, which didn't look like that, and they would just redact it. And because I'm reading through the documents, but that is not what happened. They decided to write a different paper instead of what was already.
Who you say they? Who's they?
The National Intelligence Council.
The National Intelligence Council was at the time that the law passed was doing a thorough review, or doing a review. We don't know how thorough. How many pages? You've been on this task force. You've gotten a sense of, if it's not 5 pages, how many pages worth of information would you guess the United States government was in possession of related to Wuhan lab and COVID possible links?
I can tell you that Director Gabbard is working through, I believe, 2,000 pages.
2,000?
They're trying to get released in the first batch. This is the law states yes, any and all, but there's still the requirement to run it through the different agencies to ensure that there's not some sources and methods. But there's like 2,000 pages.
2,000 pages. 2,000 pages. I want to show you what Admiral Haynes, Director Haynes, said to me when I wrote to her, Senator Braun and I wrote to her following this outrageous, ridiculous report. She wrote back to me and said, well, we declassified only what we could without endangering sources and methods. Only what we could. 5 pages of summary that itself has redactions. The 5 pages have redactions. And you're telling me there are literally thousands of documents. Why are they hiding all of this material?
This is the interagency process of declassification is highly bureaucratic, and that is being worked. And I think you saw just a few days ago, Director Gabbard released some information about the lab.
Was Director Haynes, Admiral Haynes, was she involved in making the decision not to release the material?
I don't have any proof that she was involved in the direct decision. I have no emails saying that directly, but
it was her office, and it's her signature on the letter to me. It's her office that sent the 5 pages. She's the one who said, this is what we have. This is all we have. You're telling me there were 2,000 plus documents.
No, I'm
they
telling you
sent us
that
5.
the first swath of documents that we're looking to, there's many more than that.
I got you. Many more. Let me tell you what this so-called 5-page report, what it said in its substance, to the extent there was any. They said, number one, that nothing that was researched at the Wuhan lab could plausibly be a progenitor of SARS-CoV-2. Number two, they said there is no evidence of any research-related incident involving Wuhan employees that might have been related to the pandemic. Now, in your experience, given what you have seen, are those true statements?
Some of that would have to be covered and classified, but no, they're not true. If we wanted to get into details, I don't believe that's true.
So the United States government first deliberately violated a law passed by Congress, signed by the president, that ordered them to release all information related to the Wuhan lab, number one. Number two, they then violated the law again by withholding thousands and thousands of pages that they had at the time and knew were covered by the law. And number three, the conclusions, so-called, they released to the public are false. If that is not a cover-up, I don't know what is. And if our elected officials and unelected officials in this case, in the IC and ODNI, if they can get by with blatantly violating the statutes of this country and lying to the American people, I'm sorry, but we don't have a democracy anymore.
Hawley is exercising the Senate's supreme oversight function. He refuses to let top officials pass the buck. The signature on the document belongs to Director Haynes. Therefore, the ultimate accountability falls on her agency. Hawley's statement, "We don't have a democracy anymore," is not a hyperbolic exaggeration. The foundation of a representative government is the consent of the people based on transparent information. If intelligence agencies and unelected officials can arbitrarily tear up the law and rewrite the historical truth about a pandemic that killed millions without facing any consequences, then the seat of power has completely escaped the control of and the people. Analyze Hawley's tactics. He doesn't start with empty accusations. He begins with the most solid legal foundation. A piece of legislation he authored himself, passed with absolute bipartisan consensus, unanimously, and signed by the president. The law explicitly demanded declassify any and all information. The contrast Hawley creates here is highly lethal. On one side is the weight of the highest legislative body in America demanding total transparency. On the other side is the insulting response from the executive branch, a 5-page document file, including the cover page that is heavily redacted. Hawley is establishing an undeniable premise. This is not a political disagreement. This is a blatant violation of the law by the executive branch against the legislative branch. By asking the witness, Herman, is this all the information? Hawley officially opens the door to expose the scale of the exact moment the mask falls off. Herman's testimony exposes precisely how the so-called deep state or bureaucracy operates. What is the lawful declassification process? Is taking the original report, redacting details that could endanger spies or intelligence techniques, sources, and methods, and releasing the rest. But what did the National Intelligence Council do? They wiped out the original report from the public eye and sat down to write a completely new 5-page script. This action neutralizes all objectivity and turns an intelligence report into a tool to shape public opinion. Look at Hawley's final blow when he compares the numbers. ODNI Director Avril Haines uses the protecting sources shield as an excuse for the 5 pages. But in reality, the task force is sitting on over 2,000 pages of documents just in the first batch of processing alone, and countless others. You cannot use the protecting sources excuse to hide 99% of the data, especially when the law demands absolute transparency. This is not negligence. This is a systematic, highly calculated information blackout campaign, orchestrated and from the top.
I can tell you that
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Carter. And this past Wednesday, at the Senate Homeland Security Committee hearing on COVID-19 whistleblowers, Senator Josh Hawley delivered a fatal blow without beating around the bush. He aimed his spear straight at Dr. Anthony Fauci with a damning verdict. His hands are dirty in this. Let's pause for a few seconds to grasp the weight of this moment. Right on the Senate floor, an intelligence task force witness, sitting under oath, publicly confirmed that the U.S. government's report on the pandemic released to the public is entirely false. Today, we are going to dissect this masterclass from Hawley on how to back a massive bureaucracy into a corner using their own documents. There are no cheap gotcha questions here. Hawley brought ironclad evidence, a federal law that was ignored, a heavily redacted intelligence report of merely 5 pages, and the truth about thousands of pages of classified documents being hidden to cover up the truth. Make sure to watch until the end of the video, because the way Hawley exposes Dr. Fauci's hidden hand of intervention will show you the true face of how power can manipulate the truth. Hit the subscribe button and let's get started. If the previous part was the what, then this is the motive. Why would the intelligence apparatus risk breaking the law to cover this up? Hawley aims his spear directly at the root cause, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Witness Herman provides an incredibly valuable detail on how shadow power operates. Fauci didn't need to issue a direct order. He merely suggested a list of scientific experts with pre-existing biases for the intelligence agency to consult, and the bureaucracy, which typically auto-protects internal elites, was perfectly happy to pursue those recommendations despite internal warnings. This is the very act of putting his thumb on the scale, manipulating the outcome right from the starting line. Hawley doesn't hesitate to point out the extreme conflict of interest here. Fauci is not an impartial observer. Hawley accuses Fauci of being directly involved in funding gain-of-function research in that very Wuhan lab and of lying to Congress multiple times about it. The assertion his hands are dirty in this is the perfect summary of the entire hearing. An individual full of special interests manipulated the national intelligence community, forcing them to derail an independent investigation to protect his own reputation. That is an act of stealing the American public's right to know the truth. Hawley answered the question of why trust in institutions is collapsing. It's not because of online conspiracy theories, but because the people are constantly being lied to by the very officials whose salaries are paid by their tax dollars. When the light of transparency is extinguished by a 5-page whitewash report, the rule of law is severely threatened. This incident doesn't just end with a hearing. It raises an urgent demand for accountability. What do you guys think about this interrogation? Does the intelligence agency and the elite joining forces to hide 2,000 pages of documents and rewrite the truth outrage you? Leave your thoughts in the comment section.